You know, I saw the comments about the story. Content creators were posting non-stop, hyping it up, and honestly, I thought I was being fooled. I didn't think it would actually be that good. I thought everybody was just caught up in the usual Wuthering Waves hype. And then I played it. And I can say without a doubt that the entire Renascita arc, the whole 2.x series from 2.0 to especially 2.5, might be one of my favorite storytelling experiences of the year. Across anything, movies, anime, video games, whatever. Wuthering Waves Renascita arc might just be the highlight. So now I want to share my 2.5 experience with you. I'm going to go through every part of the story, break down what I love because trust me, there is a lot, and really dive into all the moments that hit me. There are really amazing moments in there. So if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and tell me what you thought. Did you love the story? Were there parts that confused you? I want to hear your interpretations of the scene that stood out to you. And of course, subscribe, hit the notification to submit on any of my future videos. Alright, let's get to it. So the quest kicks off with us and Abby just chilling and having fun in Septimont. And honestly, from the very start, I knew I was going to enjoy this story. Because Wuthering Waves did something that, while small, meant a lot. They animated the simple acts of eating and enjoying the moment. Now that might not sound like much, but in most gacha games, we never see stuff like that actually animated. It's always skipped over or implied. But Wuthering Waves takes the time to show it, and that kind of detail, those little touches, they matter. It tells me they care. It tells me they're serious about making this story feel real, grounded, and lived in. So even if by some impossible chance I don't end up enjoying the story, which I absolutely did, just from that scene, I already know that they were going to put everything they had. And that moment got me hyped up for everything that was about to follow. Anyway, after that, we get a call from a member of the Black Shores, and what they say is very interesting stuff. First off, we finally get clarity on Cordesia. We're told that when she uses her forte, her ability, she absorbs the frequencies around her, and that explains a lot. Back in version 2.4, when she was in the version of Septimont tainted by the dark tide, she felt the pull of the Thermodian so intensely, and now we know why. It was because of her ability. She was absorbing all the corrupted frequencies from the dark side, and even if it wasn't real, just the act of drawing in those frequencies made her feel that pull, and that is an interesting mechanic tied directly to her lore. We also learned that the best place for Cordesia to rest up is in the inverted tower. Why? Because it is deeply connected to Imperator, so we can assume she is there right now, recovering and safe. But here's the other thing, Cordesia also picked up on some residual energy, Leviathan's energy. She sensed it coming from somewhere deep in the ocean, a place that we'll come to know as the Fabricatorium of the Deep. And that kicks off the next part of our journey, tracking down the source of that energy. Now, one thing that I've absolutely loved throughout the whole story is the time we spent talking to Abby. We haven't had this much one-on-one interaction with her in a very long time, and yes, I understand that you all don't think Abby is a girl. I think Abby is a female. Let's just go with that lore for now. These little conversations that we have with Abby is a highlight for me, because even if they don't move the plot forward in a big way, just seeing their relationship play out naturally in these quiet moments, it makes everything feel more human, more grounded, and that really adds to the story for me. After that, we run into Fenrico, and in our conversation with him, we start to understand his goals, what he's really after. You see, Fenrico wants power, but not just any power. He wants divine power. Power strong enough to protect Reguna in the only way he believes he can. Now, hearing that the first time, I rolled my eyes a bit. I thought, yeah, this is classic villain talk. It sounded like the typical thing that an antagonist would say to justify whatever shady things they're about to do. But after finishing the story and thinking back on all the roles that Fenrico had played throughout the entire 2.x series, I've got way more to say about him, his writing, his motivations. It's a lot deeper than I expected. I'll dive more into it later in the video. Anyway, he asks us to join him in his mission, and of course we say no. Then suddenly a massive wave hits. Whether Fenrico caused the wave or it came from something else, I'm still not entirely sure. But it destroyed the entire ship and sends us plunging underwater. Before we even have time to react, we see a portal, one with chains, pulling us into it. And on the other side, that's when we meet her, the MVP of the entire story, the one everything is really about, the real force behind the 2.5 arc, Phrolova. Now, if you already liked how Phrolova was portrayed before, this story takes her to a whole new level. Before we even get to the plot, there are a few details about Phrolova that stood out to me during the entire playthrough, stuff I just have to talk about first, because I think they elevate her character in a big way. First, listen to this clip, just listen to it carefully and tell me if you noticed anything.
A soul in defiance of itself, its essence seeping into a brilliant gem. It drifted here with lingering whispers of resentment. Enchanted, the faithful of the deep followed its call, seeking to claim the divine power as their own.
Did you catch that? There's a shift in her voice. In one part of the sentence, she sounds lighter, softer, almost gentle. And then in the same sentence, her voice drops. It gets deeper, darker, more intense. And that shift, it happens over and over again throughout the entire playthrough. Now, Wuthering Waves never directly points this out. They don't explain it. It just happens. And the whole tonal shift might be inconsequential, maybe just something dramatic that the voice actress thought to do to make Phrolova a lot more interesting. Or maybe this could be as a result of everything that we're about to experience in the Phrolova story. Tell me what you think about this tonal shift in the comments. Another interesting thing about Phrolova that I noticed throughout the entire playthrough is that anytime Phrolova gets emotional, whether she hears something painful, gets angry, or feels something deeply, there's this little detail that blew my mind. Her pupils dilate, and that is insane to me. Wuthering Waves did not need to go that hard, but they did. And it's such a subtle thing, but it makes everything she feels hit harder. You see how much it affects her, and it really makes her feel real. So yeah, I just had to get these things out of the way. They're tiny details, but it made a huge impact in how I saw her character. Now let's get back into the story. When we finally meet Phrolova, two things immediately stand out. Firstly, she's covered in injuries, and secondly, she's being hunted by the Order. Naturally, we demand answers. What's going on? Why is she like this? And that's when she tells us about the Thenodian residue, the same residue we've been chasing after this whole time. You see, back in the 2.4 story, Phrolova managed to get her hands on a piece of that residue, the one that was originally obtained from Mia, but now it's no longer with her. And to retrieve it again, she needs our help. Our goals align. We want the residue to understand what is really going on and to keep it out of the wrong hands, and she needs it for her own reasons. So we agree to cooperate and follow her to wherever the residue might be. But on that journey, things start getting weird. We begin seeing what looks like ghosts, spirits, echoes, maybe reverberations of the past, people appearing along the way. And the strange thing is only Phrolova can see them. And it gets even stranger. During one of the fights, Phrolova falls into a trance, and in that moment, she finds herself in another world entirely. Now in this scene, Wuthering Waves does what it does best. It throws us into a conversation with absolutely no context. We're just dropped in, no setup, no explanation. So it's up to us to figure out exactly what's going on. And during my first playthrough, I thought this was a flashback, so a moment from Phrolova's past, but this assumption turned out to be completely wrong. Anyway, what we do get is a conversation between Phrolova and a couple, Achilles and Leah. And in here, Leah is, for lack of better words, tweaking. One moment she's calm, and in the next she's spiraling. Achilles is doing everything he can to comfort her, but you can see that something is deeply off. But here's what really stood out, Phrolova, and it's how she acted. You see, we see a version of Phrolova that we had never seen before. She's softer, more human, genuinely concerned for Leah. And that concerns feel real, not just on performance. It was honestly moving to watch. And then she says something that changes everything. I found a way. Soon I'll bring you all back. At the time, it felt cryptic. I didn't understand it. But now, looking back, that line sets the stage for what is to come. Because this is the first glimpse into what might be the most tragic story Wuthering Waves has ever told. Shortly after that scene, we get a revealing moment with Phrolova. It's here she finally opens up a bit, giving us insights into her ideals and her plans. She tells us about something called the Lost Beyond. It's a Seronosphere that she created herself. A space she describes as a utopia, a place with no pain, no sorrow, no suffering. A world where everyone is happy. Now, of course, we've all seen how this goes in other medias. Anytime someone talks about a place like this, a perfect world, it is never that simple. There's always a catch, something hidden, something that eventually breaks. But for now, all we know is that the Lost Beyond is Phrolova's dream, a perfect haven. She also mentioned that in order for the Lost Beyond to function properly, she needs a touch of divinity, specifically the Thenodian residue, the very same gem we've been chasing after since the beginning. But here's where things get complicated. The Order wants them too. Fenrico needs it, not just for the Order's plan, but for his own personal agenda. And because Phrolova's vision and the Order's goals clash, she took the last of her strength and sealed the gem deep within the Lost Beyond. That act alone sparked a conflict between her and the Order, leading to the injuries we saw when we first met her. She'd been fighting them off ever since, until the Rover showed up. Now, obviously, since we're technically enemies, we don't trust Phrolova at all. I mean, she knows this. She even kind of throws shade at us for thinking any real trust could exist between us, because she understands something we don't want to admit. There's only one gem, and eventually, whether we like it or not, we will have to fight for it. We need the gem to possibly study it and keep it out of the wrong hands, and to us, she is the definition of the wrong hands. She is Fraxidus, she is dangerous. So when she says, there will come a time when only one of us will walk away with the gem, she's not just warning us, she's foreshadowing the conclusion of this entire journey. Anyway, as we move deeper, we stumbled into something wild, something called Ecro Brooders. What are Ecro Brooders? echoes. The whole purpose is to create the common echoes we see all around Renascita. That means all the echoes we've encountered in Reguna and even in Septimonth, they are artificially made, created by harvesting the frequencies of tattered discords and other echoes. All of it processed here in the Fabricatorium of the Deep. Now let that sink in, because again, this is something that nobody is really talking about. I mean, we're talking about the manufacturing of echoes, artificial life. And no matter what world or medium you look at it, the creation of artificial life is never seen as good. It's always unnatural, always playing God. It's blasphemy, and here it's just happening in the shadows. So with this, we see not just how twisted the Fabricatorium is, but how far the Order is willing to go. No morality, no limits, just raw control. Then not long after, from Phrolova's perspective, we hear voices. These voices sound like they're in pain, deep, unbearable pain. And even though the game doesn't spell it out, we can safely assume that they're tied to this so-called utopia that she mentioned earlier, the Lost Beyond. We keep pushing forward, and during another battle, it happens again. We're pulled back into that strange dreamlike world, the same one we visited earlier. And just like before, we see that couple again, Achilles and Leia. But this time, they look different. They seem more peaceful. The atmosphere feels lighter, and during the conversation, Phrolova tells them not to worry, that he, likely referring to the Rover, will take care of everything. That right there tells us something important. This world is not a memory, it's not a flashback, it is happening in real time, playing out inside Phrolova's mind as she is fighting. And this entire conversation pretty much confirms that this place is in fact the Lost Beyond, a realm Phrolova created and one only she can access, at least for now. But here's where it gets a little complicated. The conversation in this world is calm, tranquil even, there's a real sense of peace. And yet, there's something that is off, something unsettling. One side filled with suffering, agonizing voices, and the other is calm and serene, where people seem at peace. But even in that peaceful side, there is something that is not quite right. You see, when they talk about wanting to return to the real world, about being revived, there's a flicker, a glitch, something dark beneath the surface. And when they tell Phrolova that she must not die, that she has to live until she brings them all back, it sounds more like a command than a plea. It's twisted, it's not evil exactly, but it's wrong in a quiet, airy way. But then we're shown something else, something big. There's a part of Phrolova that wants to die, that wants release, that is tired, but she keeps going, not because she wants to, but because her ambition won't let her stop. Now remember what I told you about Fenrico, that he's not just some classic villain, how his antagonism is layered, not just evil for evil's sake. Well, this is where we get a tiny glimpse into that nuance. You see, we see a recording, just a snippet, of Fenrico speaking to one of his acolytes. And at first, yeah, it sounds like your typical villain monologue. He says stuff like, "The foundation of the paradise is complete, we must purge those who stray." Classic tyrant stuff. But then the acolyte's reaction, that's where things start to shift. You see, the acolyte is confused, almost scared, because what Fenrico is saying right now, it doesn't add up to what he told him before. The orders have changed, the logic isn't tracking, something is off. And then there is this moment, a brief exchange between the acolyte and Fenrico that I want you to see for yourself. Just watch how the devs at Wuthering Waves crafted this entire dialogue.
This is different from what you told us. You said our goal was to return the divine power within the gem to the holy sphere. You never mentioned this part. Has the plan changed? Primus, should I continue the recording? Recording? When did I ever... I see. No. Continue recording.
You see, when the acolyte asks if he should continue the recording, Fenrico hesitates. There is this flicker of confusion, then he catches himself and says, "No, continue the recording." It is subtle, but it is super important. But later in the story, this gets explained and it confirms something. You see, Fenrico is not in full control of himself. He is being manipulated, not directly, but through the lingering influences of the Thenodian. The power that surrounds him is eroding his clarity, distorting his mind, messing with his memory. But here's what makes this so interesting. Fenrico knows. He knows he is slipping. And instead of giving in, he's setting up fail-safes. This recording, they're not just propaganda, they're anchors. Documentation created during moments where his mind is still sharp, so that later he or someone else can look back and make sense of everything that is happening. And that's such a clever move from the writers. It paints Fenrico not as some power-mad lunatic, but as someone fighting to stay grounded while drowning in something bigger than himself. Now, don't get me wrong. Fenrico, even before gaining all this power, was never a saint. He has always been twisted. But this whole situation tells me something deeper about him. Nothing he does comes from a place of selfishness. Everything, no matter how warped, has always been for the good of Renascita, or at the very least, his idea of what is good for Renascita. Because if he were just a bad guy for badness' sake, if he just wanted power for the sake of it, there'd be no reason for him to set up all these fail-safes. But but he did. And later on, we see documents and recordings he made himself, trying to track and preserve clarity as his mind slips. That wouldn't exist if this were just about domination or ego. To me, this confirms something deeper. The Order as a whole, even though they're framed as antagonists, are way more complex than people give them credit for. And Fenrico, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best written characters in this entire arc. Anyway, after that, we get another conversation between Phrolova and the Rover, and there are two really important takeaways from this exchange. First, we get what might be the single most important line in the entire game. Phrolova tells the Rover, "A long-lost friend once told me that every promise matters. Once you make one, you see it through, no matter the cost." And that line comes back later in a huge way. And not just as a callback, but as a cornerstone of one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the entire story, so remember it. Now the second thing, and this one's more subtle, but I think this was the moment the Rover stopped being a self-insert. You see, before this, during dialogues, we usually had multiple options to pick from. Like we were shaping what the Rover would say. But in this moment, there was only one line, just one response, no options. And that told me something, that the story was shifting from us playing as the Rover to the Rover becoming their own person, their own voice. It wasn't just, what do you want to say anymore? It was, this is what the Rover feels. Moving forward, we catch glimpses, silhouettes of something important, but I'm going to skip over that for now because this ties into something much later. Just know that we see Phrolova speaking to the Rover and then somebody else. Then suddenly they get separated. It's another one of Fenrico's mechanisms, one more barrier to stop them from reaching the end. Now during this separation, three really important things happen. First, we reunite with Abby, and honestly, every time we talk to Abby, it's like a breath of fresh air. I don't know if it's because we don't see her often, or because of her energy, but every time she shows up, it feels good. Second, we get a deeper look into what Phrolova has gone through. We come across some of her own documentations, notes she's made while trying to find a way to store human consciousness. She talked about using the retrograde rain at first, but that fails. It can't sustain human consciousness long term. Then she tried using the dark tide, but that fails too. Everyone in the dark tide is fully controlled by the Leviathan, and that's not what she wants either. And then we see her final experiment, one that goes into creating an artificial Serrano, and that one's risky. It takes constant energy for her just to keep it running, but she sees promise in it, and this is obviously the Lost Beyond. But this whole section hits hard because everything she's experimenting with, the retrograde rain, the dark tide, we've seen before. We know how dangerous each of these things are on their own. So for her to be using them, not for power, not to dominate, but to bring people back, that tells us something. It shows how far she's willing to go, but more than that, it shows that she's already tried everything else. Everything. Nothing worked. This is all she has left. And that really adds a sense of futility to everything she's doing. It paints a picture of someone who is not just desperate, but exhausted. And honestly, I think that's a really important thing to understand about Phrolova. Lastly, there's a conversation between Phrolova and somebody called the Grand Architect. And I genuinely think that this is one of the most underrated moments in the entire story, because nobody is talking about the Grand Architect. But let me be clear, this is possibly one of the most important figures in the entire game. First off, based on everything we've seen, their name, their role, it's safe to say that the Grand Architect is essentially the leader of the Fractsidus. But more importantly, this scene confirms something we need to stop sugarcoating. If you still believe the Fractsidus are anything but pure evil, you're just being delusional. Because this scene, it screams manipulation. Everything about this interaction is steeped in it. You see, the Grand Architect doesn't just show up for a conversation. They disguise themselves as someone Phrolova loves deeply. Specifically, they appear as Tess, one of the villagers from the Lost Beyond, the very people Phrolova is desperately trying to bring back. And what's worse is that the dialogue implies that they do this often. Phrolova literally tells them to stop appearing that way, to stop using that face. And the Grand Architect responds, "You used to love when I did." That right there shows that this isn't a one-time trick. It is a repeated tactic, and it's sickening. But this goes even deeper than just appearances. I want you to pause and watch this clip and see if you notice something manipulative.
But you still can. You're saving us now. I just want you to finish Cristoforo's plan first. The seabed is in chaos. Now isn't the best time to bring us back. Merging reverberations with tacit discords. Keeping our consciousness alive while creating new vessels for us. Don't you want more time to make it perfect? A true revival, done the right way.
You see, not only do they take on Tess's appearance and body language, they also speak like they are Tess. They use the collective we. We know you want to help us. You want to bring us back. They pretend to be the very people Phrolova longs to save. But then, very suddenly, they switch. When it's time to nudge her towards Christophero's plan, they drop the we and say I. That shift from collective empathy to personal agenda, that is psychological precision. They use we to earn Phrolova's trust, then slips to I when it's time to push their own will. And that is a chilling level of manipulation, something that I never thought I'd see in a gacha game. It is insane, it is beautiful, disturbing, but beautifully written. Massive props to the Wuthering Waves devs, because even I was confused during my first playthrough. They were introduced as the Grand Architects, but they acted like tests. They were tests. And I didn't fully grasp what was going on until I finished the scene and rewatched it again. That's how seamless the manipulation is, and it is the apex of psychological control. But then we get something really important. Remember that line I said might be the most important to the whole story, the one about promises? Yeah, this is where it hits. And can we just give him my accolades for predicting this entire thing? The whole idea of Phrolova meeting the Rover when they had their memories. This was something that I predicted before the story came out. And to be honest, a whole lot of the things that happened in this entire story was also predicted by me in this video on the screen right now. So if you're interested, watch this video after this one. Anyway, during her talk with the Grand Architects, Phrolova says something even deeper, that there is a place for the Rover in the lost beyond, because he has still not fulfilled the promise that he made her. That right there tells us that this is not a casual connection, there is history, there is weight. After that, Phrolova continues on to find what she's looking for, but then just as Phrolova is about to find it, she walks straight into a trap. But before anything can happen to her, the Rover shows up, he finds a way to reach her, he steps in, he saves her. And as we play through this part, we realize something crazy, that Fenrico, or in this case, the Thermodian, will stop at absolutely nothing to keep us from the truth. I mean, now they're not just fighting us, they're trying to destroy everything. The entire environment around us begins to collapse, violently tearing itself apart. So the Rover and Phrolova are forced to run, dodging falling debris, escaping wave after wave of destruction. Eventually we make it out, but only to stumble into something far more disturbing. You see, we arrive at the place that holds the second vowed truth about the Order, and this one hits differently. Here we see people, acolytes of the Order, so deeply devoted it doesn't feel human. This is devotion twisted into something horrifying. You see, these people have no will left, no life in their eyes. I mean, the Rover even pointed out that they are hollow, completely consumed. So much so that the only way to make it out of there is to fake this devotion ourselves. We have to act just as devoted, just as blind, just to slip past them. I mean, that's how far this corruption goes. Eventually we escape that nightmare and we find ourselves in a new location. And there we discover a document, one left by Fenrico himself. And this is where we finally understand what is really going on. You see, we learn about a Harbinger, a force so powerful that it could plunge all of Renascita into darkness. And in a way, it already has. You see, Fenrico also documented that the people of Reguna, their subconscious minds are already shackled by the dark side. And if he wants to resist the dark side, he doesn't just have to defeat the Harbinger, but he has to bring back every trapped soul that it has claimed. But that's not all. We find out that Fenrico is also after the Lost Beyond as well as the gem. Not to destroy them, but to use them. You see, he wants to house the subconscious minds of Regunesi inside the Lost Beyond while he fights off the dark side. That's why those empty, brainwashed people we saw earlier were like that. They were failed vessels, failed martyrs, test subjects for this very idea. And when you compare this to the Fenrico we heard in those earlier recordings, the one who wanted to purge the impure and rewrite everything, this feels like a completely different person. I mean, how he's carrying out his goal is still messed up, don't get me wrong, but this entire scene just reinforces what we've been saying all along. That one, Fenrico is split. He has thoughts that contradict themselves, and the ones he chooses to recourse, the ones he understands, those are the ones that feel most like him. And two, Fenrico is not your typical villain. He is layered, he is tragic, he is torn. He's a man driven by fear, vision, and maybe even a bit of guilt. Now from this point on, the story starts to unfold everything. This is where it all begins to click, where all the pain, the mystery, and the depth finally come together. And I won't lie to you, this part is probably the most tragic moment in the entire story. In fact, might be the most tragic moment in the entire game. So first, we go through the usual fighting off enemies pushing forward, but then something unexpected happens. Somehow we find ourselves back in the Lost Beyond, but this time it is different. It's not Phrolova who enters it, it's the Rover himself. And right away we notice that something has changed. See, the last time we entered the Lost Beyond, when we were through Phrolova's eyes, we were seeing the present. Everything was happening now. But this time, we're not in the present anymore. We're seeing the past, a memory, a moment frozen in time. We see a version of the village in its full life. Phrolova is just about to set out for a journey. Everyone in the village is there, wishing her luck, cheering her on. It's a celebration. She's holding holding a violin, dressed so elegantly, so full of hope. She wants to go out into the world and share her music, make the world feel what her village feels. And in that moment, everything just hits. The music, the colors, the feeling of pride and innocence. You cannot help but root for her. After this heartfelt send-off, the Rover enters the frame. He starts to ask the village about the gem. But remember, this is a simulation of the past. So these people have no idea what he's talking about. They're not aware of anything happening in the future. But the Rover doesn't know this yet. So naturally, he turns to Phrolova, hoping maybe she knows something. But again, this is past Phrolova. She doesn't recognize anything about this situation, so he gets nothing. Then the Rover walks to Phrolova's home, and this is where everything shifts. Inside, we find 2 documents. The first is a record, a personal record of how she and the Rover first met, and how much that moment meant to her. How in him she felt like she finally had a true friend. And that ties all the way back to the promise that the Rover made her, a promise we still don't fully know yet. But the part I want you to focus on is everything she wrote after the first paragraph, because what follows is something so raw, so quietly devastating. It's just a simple list. A list of the performances she gave, week after week, month after month, maybe even years. Each one recorded, each one done with hope. Hope that he would show up. Hope that he would keep his promise. But as the list goes on, the tone changes. And then we get to the line that breaks everything. He will never come. And that line alone, it captures everything. It's not just about disappointment, it's hopelessness. It's her realizing that she kept going, she kept playing, she kept clinging to that one belief. And still, he never came. But then the second document is so much worse. Because you see, up until this point in the game, we don't know exactly what happened to the village. We only know that something terrible occurred. The villagers are gone, and Phrolova has been trying desperately to bring them back. And this document reveals what that journey looked like for her. It's not a story, it's not even a journal, it's a record of failure, one after another. She tried everything. She prayed to the divinities, failed. She experimented with rebirth and immortality, failed. She sought answers in the Wave 1 phenomena, failed. 47th entry failed, 84th entry failed, 126th entry failed, 189th entry failed. Just failure over and over and over. You get the sense that this didn't go on for days, months, or even years, but centuries. Thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of attempts. And every single time she tried to bring them back, she failed. But here's what really breaks you. It's not the word failed repeated 1,000 times. It's what she wrote right after one of those failures. Why did I fail again? And then I saw Triss again. That line, that moment, it changes everything. Now think back, when was the last time we saw Triss? You guessed it, when the Grand Architect disguised themselves at her. So when Phrolova says, I saw Triss again, she didn't truly see Triss. She saw the Fractsidus wearing her face. Now think about that for a second. Imagine Phrolova at her absolute lowest, completely shattered, and in that moment, the Grand Architect appears, not as themselves but as Triss, and not just disguised, but they became her, the dead Triss. I mean, we saw how flawless it was, how precise, how coldly manipulative it all felt. That's who they chose to be at that exact moment, because for Phrolova to truly believe she saw Triss again, she must have been desperate enough to want it, need it. And when we consider how seamlessly the Grand Architects pulled it off, we realize they likely did the exact same thing back then. They found Phrolova at her most broken and showed her the one person she longed for the most. So in this scene, when the Grand Architect says that Phrolova used to love when they transformed into Triss, it hits so much harder. Because that's not just manipulation, that is cruelty disguised as comfort. Offering someone a glimpse of everything they lost, wrapped in just enough hope to make them break all over again. And I'm fully convinced that the Grand Architect knew exactly what Phrolova was trying to do, and that she was chasing something impossible, and still chose to exploit that. So again, anyone who tells me that the Fractsidus are nuanced or somehow good people, you are lying, flat out lying, because when it comes to textbook evil, the Fractsidus are the definition. There's no moral gray area here. Anyway, after that, we finally come to understand what the people of the Lost Beyond truly are. And the truth is, they're not people at all, they're tacit discords, and that changes everything. It makes the pain they feel, the sorrow, the emptiness, it all makes sense now. Because they're not truly alive, they're entities who believe they're human, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe actual humans are trapped inside the bodies of tacit discords. Either way, it is disturbing. It's not something that anyone should be okay with. Then we find ourselves in a hallway with multiple doors. And as we step into each one, we start uncovering key moments from the past. One door takes us to a conversation between Phrolova and Cristoforo. This was before the events of version 2.4, before he wrote the script Soronosphere, and before he trapped Rover and Kotathir inside it. Another door shows us a moment between her and Fenrico, and this conversation likely happened in the 2.0 story, before Phrolova unleashed chaos in Reguna. We see that it was all planned. And finally, we get a conversation between Phrolova and Scar way back, probably around version 1.0. And that moment made it crystal clear. Everything we're seeing now, now, all of it, had been emotions since way back then. These scenes weren't just flashbacks, they were revelations, and honestly, they were some of the biggest highlights of the entire story. And then we arrive at what is arguably the single most important moment in the entire story. We find Phrolova on stage, dressed up in a mournful outfit, performing a piece that's just heartbreaking. It's music to mourn the death of her family, her village, and everything she once held dear. And in that performance, we saw everything. We saw how her village, her home, was wiped out. She had just finished a performance and returned home to see her family. But the moment she arrived, right then, a meteor landed, and in an instant took everything from her. Her home, her family, her friends, everything. Only she remained, barely alive, half dead, saved by the sudden awakening of her powers. And how sudden it was, how painful it was. I mean, what are the odds that a meteor would fall on your small town? 1 in a million, 10 million, 1 billion. It makes you understand that yes, of course you want to get it all back. Of course that kind of senseless loss would drive her mad. It made no sense. It felt like some cruel cosmic joke. After she finishes her piece, the crowd applauds, people are praising her, calling the piece beautiful. But in the audience, among all those voices, there was one that stood out, the Rover. And the Rover understood and expressed that behind this beautiful piece, there was pain, there was sorrow, there was mourning. And it's in that moment between Phrolova and the Rover, through their conversation, you can feel it. A connection forms, not the scripted line she might have given to others. No, with the Rover, it was something real, something that mattered. And this is where the promise comes in, the one I mentioned earlier. The Rover promised her that once she has finished composing her scripts, he would return. He would come back to see her, but he didn't. And now here's where things get really messy, because that promise is what started everything. That was the spark that set Phrolova down her path, the beginning of her descent. That promise led her to the Fractsidus, led her to take lives, led her to spiral into obsession and madness. So now people ask, who is to blame? Was it the Rover for making a promise he couldn't keep, even though we all know he eventually wiped his own memory, meaning he couldn't have remembered that promise? Or was it Phrolova for letting that promise consume her? Because remember, the Rover is the kind of person who doesn't take promises lightly. He made it clear, he keeps his promises no matter what. So now the question is, who really failed who? Here's my take. Now we could take the easy route here and say, well, they're both right or they're both wrong and call it a day. But I think even when both parties make mistakes, there's always one who carries more weight. And for me, that person is Phrolova. Why? Well, let's start with the obvious. Something that everybody has been saying. Don't take a promise from a stranger so seriously. And in this case, it is kind of true. At the time that the promise was made, Phrolova and the Rover were complete strangers. For her to latch onto a promise so deeply, to make it mean so much, some might even call it naive. But here's the thing, I get it. Because firstly, there are some people in the world that you meet and immediately you just click. There is this indescribable connection, a bond, something about them that just feels right. And when someone like that makes a promise, you hold on to it like your life depends on it. I think we've all had someone like that in our lives. Whether we met them for a moment or we grew into it over time, when they speak, we listen. We hang on to their every word. So when someone like that makes a promise, yeah, we take it seriously. We take it to heart. And with Phrolova, I don't even think it is just about belief. You see, yes, she genuinely believed that the Rover would come back. But more than that, I think she hoped desperately. That promise became her lifeline. I think that promise was her first real attempt to let go, to even begin forgetting about the village she lost, the family she failed to save. And after so many failures, is it really so unbelievable that she clung to such a simple human promise, putting a few kind words on a pedestal after all that pain? That is not naivety, that is being human. But even with all that said, here's the thing. We have no context for why the Rover wiped their memory. Zero, nada. And let me tell you, the day Wuthering Waves finally decides to tell us that story, the day they lay it all bare, why someone as powerful, and for lack of a better word, as good as the Rover, chose to forget everything. All the friends they made, all the promises they swore to keep, all the pain, the history, the entire weight of their past. The day we learn why they gave it all up, that would be the saddest story in the entire game, bar none. But as for now, we just don't have that story. No reasons, no explanations, just silence and speculation. And I think everyone online can agree on a simple truth. Context matters. You hear a headline, that person killed somebody, and your first thoughts, yeah, they belong in jail. But when the context comes in, it was self-defense. Suddenly, it's not a crime, it is survival. That one detail changes everything. Because context is the difference between condemnation and understanding, between guilt and grace. But even more than that, remember what I said earlier about meeting somebody and instantly feeling a connection, like you've known them forever? Well, the harsh reality is, it doesn't always go both ways. You might walk away from that moment feeling like it changed your life. Meanwhile, to them, it was just another good conversation, one of many. Not because they're cold or careless, but because that's just the way the world works. And that really seemed to be the case with Phrolova and the Rover. Because at the time the Rover made that promise, they knew nothing about her. Nothing about her village, her grief, her mission. I mean, Phrolova told a story to them, but to them, it could just have been that, a story. There is a million ways that anybody would have interpreted that story that Phrolova told. But even more than that, they had their own life, their own struggles, their own reasons. I mean, I would not be shocked at all if that promise just came from a place of kindness. That yes, although it carried weight for the Rover, it didn't carry as much weight for them as it did for Phrolova. So even though it makes perfect sense why she clung to it, why she made that promise her lifeline, we can't fairly turn around and blame the Rover for that. Not when they were still just a stranger, not when they had no idea what the promise would even mean. Anyway, moving forward, we spot the Grand Architect, disguised as just another audience member. And they offer her something, an invitation to join the Fractsidus. They tell her that they have exactly what she needs, the tools, the power, the knowledge, everything to create the Lost Beyond. And in her desperation, she accepts. And again, everything makes sense. Because even though I say that I blame Phrolova more, that is just it. I blame her a bit more. Because I am firmly on the this is just how it goes camp. That sometimes messages get mixed up, things get mixed up, and you cannot really blame anyone in this situation. But again, this is all a memory, it has already happened. So when we come back to the present, Phrolova tries to move forward with a plan, but the Rover stops her. Understandably so, he is upset. Phrolova wanted him to be a part of the Lost Beyond. She wanted to trap him inside it. But even with all that, even with the tension and betrayal still hanging in the air, Phrolova insists that they still need to find the gem, that they still need to find Fenrico. And understandably, the Rover agrees. He decides to keep going with her. Now it's the two of them, the Rover and Phrolova, heading together to face Fenrico. And that's when everything comes to a head, because Fenrico is the final boss of the entire arc. Then we fight Fenrico. I remember all that talk about the harbinger of the dark side. Yeah, it turns out that it was Fenrico all along. But here's where things take a turn. See, when Fenrico finally realized what he had become, when he understands the full weight of what he had done, he makes a choice. One that might surprise some people, but to me, it just stayed true to who he has always been. Fenrico never wanted power, he never wanted control. All he ever wanted was to protect his nation, that is it. So the moment he sees that he himself might be the cause of its ruin, he doesn't run, he doesn't deny it, he tries to stop everything, even at the cost of his own life. And honestly, this makes perfect sense. It is tragic, but it fits. Anyway, after that battle, after Fenrico is defeated, we reach the final stage, the real confrontation. The Rover and Phrolova. The gem is right there, their cooperation is finished. Now this moment, this exchange got a lot of people talking. Because the way the Rover spoke, he was cold, logical, a little detached. And a lot of us expected something warmer, more empathy, more understanding, especially after seeing everything Phrolova had gone through. Because no matter the memory loss, he had to have seen by now that Phrolova went down this dark road because of him, because of that promise. And yeah, I felt that way too. But here's the thing that I think people are missing. We, the players and the Rover, we are not the same. We are playing a video game. We get the full picture. We see all the trauma, the tragedy, the years of pain Phrolova went through. We are allowed to empathize because her actions don't affect us. We are watching a story. The Rover though, the Rover is living it. There's a reason why from the very beginning, the Rover has been cold towards Phrolova. Because from his perspective, Phrolova is the antagonist. She has been hostile, manipulative, and dangerous. Sure, he saw glimpses of the past from the beyond, and he learned about the promise, about what she lost. But even then, those moments don't hit the same for him as they do for us. We watched everything, we felt it, we were able to get closure and complete understanding even while still playing the game. He does not. He has no closure and more importantly, no time to even process. And honestly, he didn't even have that luxury. He was under pressure. I wouldn't be surprised if at that moment his thought process was, if he showed empathy, if he hesitated even for a second, Phrolova would take the gem, the Fractsidus would win, and that would mean the end of everything. And let's be real, even if he had been more sympathetic, would that have changed the outcome? We're talking about a woman who spent centuries chasing one singular goal. You don't undo that with a 5-minute heart-to-heart. You don't dismantle decades of obsession just because you feel sorry for someone. So yeah, the way he responded, it stung, but it was real, and honestly, it made sense. You can be on either side here. You can feel for Phrolova, or you can side with the Rover. But don't tell me that he didn't do the best he could do with what he had, because he did. Anyway, the Rover and Phrolova battle for the gem, and by the end of that fight, the worst happens. The gem falls into the hands of the Phrolova, and Phrolova dies. Now I know the Rover was probably aiming to destroy the gem, not kill Phrolova, but in doing so he effectively killed her. And she falls into the waters below, gone. And honestly, I was one of those people who expected the Rover to jump in after her, to try to save her, even if she was an enemy, even if it was too late, but he didn't. And that decision, although I understand it, I still struggle with it. The only explanation that makes sense is this. Even after seeing everything, even after knowing her story, the hatred, the tension, the antagonism the Rover felt towards Phrolova didn't fully disappear. And you know what? That is valid. Sometimes even when you understand someone's pain, even when you see their tragedy, you can still choose to see them as an enemy. Because understanding isn't the same as forgiving. And it definitely is not the same as trusting. And we the players, we get the full cinematic, the whole arc. We can pause, we can reflect, we can cry. But the Rover, he does not have that. He is in it. He is battling through chaos after chaos. So this isn't just a story for him, it is survival, it is the fate of the world. Anyway, after that, we talk to Fenrico, and he tells us about something called the Paradise. A terrible event that will happen in Septimont, and it's up to us to stop it. Then we go with Abby to the place where Phrolova fell, and there it is, the Just Beyond, so beautifully rendered, so haunting. In her death, Phrolova became the Just Beyond. She now exists in a state that is neither life nor death. And when we enter it, we find her, not triumphant, not broken, but still. She didn't get to complete her dream, but in some quiet way, she became it. And that's how the story ends. Bittersweet, heavy, but unforgettable. So what do I think of the story as a whole? Honestly, I don't even need to say it. You already know how I feel. This is, without question, the single best story in Wuthering Waves so far. And not just that, this is the single best story of any gacha game I have ever played, even surpassing the Farina story, because it is unreal. You don't go into a gacha game expecting to feel the way I felt playing Wuthering Waves, but I did, and it was beautiful. And to be honest, if I could wipe my memory just to experience it again for the first time, I absolutely would. Because even just going back through the story to write this script, reliving the moments, the reveals, the heartbreak, it reminded me why this story stuck with me so hard in the first place. It was phenomenal, and I genuinely hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed writing it. So if I had to rate it, I'll give it a 9.5. Actually no, a 9.9, because if I'm being completely honest, the only reason it is not a 10 is because I do not believe in perfection. But this came damn close. So shout out to Kuro, you have created something truly special, and I cannot wait to see what you do next. But now I want to hear from you. What did you think of the story? Was it as incredible for you as it was for me? Any complaints, favorite moments, things that caught you off guard? Drop it out in the comments, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.